The party was a lie, but it was a beautiful one. My mother, Eleanor, was a master of beautiful lies. Our backyard was transformed into something from a magazine, strung with golden globe lights that cast a warm, forgiving glow on everything they touched. They dripped from the old oak tree like captured stars, danced across the white linen tablecloths, and glinted off the rims of champagne flutes held in the manicured hands of our neighbors. The air smelled of grilled steak and my mother's expensive perfume, a scent like lilies and subtle betrayal. It was my brother Ethan's 20th birthday, and the entire world, or at least our corner of suburban Ohio, had been orchestrated to revolve around him. I stood near the edge of the stone patio, nursing a cup of lukewarm punch I didn't want. From this vantage point, I could see the whole performance. My father, Robert Monroe, stood by the grill, not cooking, but holding court. He was a big man, made bigger by the success of Monroe Construction, the company he never let us forget he built from the ground up. He'd clap a man on the shoulder, his laugh booming, a sound that didn't signal joy so much as ownership. He owned this house, this yard, this family. And there was my mother, floating between clusters of guests, her pearl necklace a perfect pale circle against her tanned skin. She'd touch an arm here, laugh softly there, her voice a melody that made everyone feel special, included. Everyone but me. She was the decorator of our family's illusion, and I was the structural beam hidden in the walls, essential but invisible. Then there was Ethan, the golden boy, the reason for the lights, the champagne, the perfectly seared steaks. He was lounging in a wicker chair, surrounded by his college friends, loud and careless and beautiful. He had our father's confident smirk and our mother's easy charm. He was their masterpiece. I was just the rough draft they'd tossed aside. For years, I had played my part. Alicia, the responsible one, the good daughter, the one who got a scholarship to study architecture so she wouldn't be a burden, the one who came home on weekends to help my mother with her charity events, the one who was, for all intents and purposes, the family's silent, reliable ATM of emotional and sometimes financial support. My name being called out pulled me from my thoughts. It was my mother's voice, amplified by the gentle tap of a knife against her glass. "A moment, everyone. A little toast." A hush fell over the yard. The golden lights seemed to brighten, focusing on her as if on a stage. My father stood beside her, his arm possessively around her waist. Ethan looked up, a lazy, entitled grin spreading across his face. "To my brilliant son, Ethan," my mother began, her voice shimmering with practiced emotion. 20 years old, it feels like just yesterday we were bringing him home. He has made us so proud." She paused, letting the sentiment hang in the air. Her eyes found mine across the patio, and her smile widened. It was her stage smile, the one that meant danger. "And to his wonderful sister, Alicia," she continued, her gaze pinning me in place, "who, to celebrate this milestone, has decided to give her brother the gift he so truly deserves, a brand new BMW. The words didn't just hang in the air, they detonated. A wave of polite, appreciative laughter rippled through the guests. They thought it was a joke, a charming, slightly extravagant family jest. My father nodded his approval, a king surveying his court. Ethan's smirk widened. He winked at one of his friends. But I knew. I had seen the glossy brochure for the 3 Series left on my pillow a week ago. I had heard the not-so-subtle hints about how important it was to keep success in the family. I had felt the suffocating pressure of their expectations, disguised as love. My pulse, which had been a steady, dull rhythm, slowed to a crawl. My face felt hot, then cold. The plastic cup in my hand began to tremble. I could have played along. I could have given a tight, forced smile and let the moment pass. It's what I had always done. I had spent 28 years swallowing my own voice to keep their perfect world spinning. But something inside me, a part of me that had been worn down to a fragile, translucent thread, finally snapped. "No," I said. The word was quiet. It wasn't a shout. It was barely a whisper. But in the sudden silence of the backyard, it sounded like a gunshot. The polite laughter died in people's throats. The chirping of the crickets seemed to stop. Every eye turned to me. My mother's stage smile froze, a brittle, cracking thing. My father's face darkened, the jovial patriarch vanishing in an instant. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and serrated. I lifted my chin. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when it came out again, was clear. I said, "No, I'm not buying him a car." I looked from my father's hardening face to my mother's stunned one. The silence that followed was thick, alive, and terrifying. You could feel the collective gasp of the guests, the sheer, delicious horror of a perfectly curated evening shattering into 1,000 pieces. Then my father started moving toward me. He didn't rush. He walked with a deliberate, heavy tread that made the flagstones seem to vibrate. "You are making a scene," he hissed, his voice a low growl meant only for me, but everyone heard it. "I'm not the one who made a public announcement about my personal finances," I shot back. And that's when I saw it, the flash of fury in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. The illusion of the perfect family man evaporated, replaced by the tyrant I knew so well. I saw his hand coming before I felt it. It wasn't a wild swing. It was a short, sharp, controlled motion. The crack of his hand against my cheek was loud, definitive. Pain exploded across my face, white-hot and blinding. The world tilted. The golden light swayed and blurred. The plastic cup slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the stone, splashing red punch like blood. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Mr. Henderson, our neighbor, took a half-step forward before his wife grabbed his arm. My brother's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of wide-eyed shock. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard my mother's voice, no longer a melody, but a venomous hiss. "Now look what you've done. Smile, Alicia. You are embarrassing us." I did smile, but it wasn't the smile she wanted. It was a broken, bloody, terrible smile. And it was the last smile of the good daughter I would ever give them. The next thing I knew, the warm, forgiving glow of the party lights had been replaced by the cold, unforgiving glare of fluorescent tubes. The ceiling was a grid of white acoustic tiles, stained with faint watermarks that looked like ghostly maps of forgotten countries. The air smelled of antiseptic and something vaguely metallic, like old blood. An IV was taped to the back of my hand, the clear tube snaking up to a bag of saline. My cheek throbbed with a deep, rhythmic ache that seemed to sync with the hum of the hospital machinery. I was alone. Of course I was alone. A nurse with tired eyes and a kind but professional demeanor came in to check my vitals. She didn't ask what happened. In an ER on a Saturday night, she probably didn't need to. The story was written in the angry purple bloom on my face. My phone, which someone had thankfully retrieved, sat on the rolling bedside table. The screen was cracked. I powered it on. 12 missed calls from Mother. One text from Ethan. "You ruined everything." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just, "You ruined everything." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I deleted the message. I deleted the call log. I deleted them from my life, one digital swipe at a time. A police officer came by next. Her name tag read Officer Diaz. She was young, with a calm, steady gaze that saw more than I wanted it to. She looked at my face, then at the cracked phone, then back at me. "Do you want to tell me what happened, miss?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I shook my head. The words were lodged in my throat, a thick, impassable lump of fear and shame. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. It would mean admitting that the perfect house on the corner was a prison, and my father, the respected businessman, was my warden. "Do you feel safe going home?" she pressed softly. The question hung in the sterile air between us. No, the answer screamed inside my head. No, I'm not safe. I haven't been safe in years. But all I could manage was a slight shake of my head. She nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She left me her card. "If you change your mind, you call this number, day or night." When she left, the silence was even louder. I was adrift. They had finally done it. They had pushed me so far that I had broken, and then they had physically broken me for refusing to stay in my place. And in the end, they had simply walked away, leaving me here under the buzz of the fluorescent lights, a piece of their mess to be cleaned up by strangers. Hours passed. A doctor came in, told me I had a mild concussion and a fractured cheekbone. He said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollowed out. As the discharge papers were being prepared, I wondered where I would go. I couldn't go back to my apartment. They knew where it was. I had maybe $200 in my wallet. The world outside this sterile little cubicle felt vast and terrifying. Just as a wave of pure panic was about to crest over me, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was Mrs. Gable, the head librarian from the city's public library, where I sometimes worked part-time during my master's program. She was in her late 60s, with a cloud of white hair and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of someone who has read thousands of stories and understood the complexities of the human heart. She was holding a worn paperback and a paper cup of what smelled like tea. She didn't gasp or exclaim over my face. She just looked at me with a deep, sorrowful kindness that did what my family's cruelty couldn't. It made me want to cry. "Oh, sweet girl," she said, her voice as soft as the rustle of turning pages. She set the tea on my table. "I got a call from Mr. Henderson's wife. She was distressed." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "You don't have to go back there, you know," she said gently. Where else would I go? The words came out as a ragged whisper. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded-up piece of paper, pressing it into my hand. There are people who can help, people who know what to do when families stop behaving like families. She then looked at me, her gaze steady. "I have a spare room. It's not much, but it's quiet, and it's safe." For the first time that night, I let a tear fall. She didn't try to hug me. She just stood there, a beacon of simple, uncomplicated decency in the wreckage of my life. In that moment, she wasn't just a kind librarian. She was a lifeline, and I clung to it. Thank you for being here with me through these tough moments. If you're listening, please let me know what city you're tuning in from in the comments below. Your presence, even from far away, means more than you know. Mrs. Gable's spare room smelled of old books and lavender. It was small, with a single bed covered by a handmade quilt and a window that looked out onto a quiet, tree-lined street. It was the safest I had felt in my entire life. She brought me a glass of water and a pain pill, told me to get some rest, and then closed the door softly behind her, leaving me in the gentle, healing dark. But I couldn't sleep. The throbbing in my cheek was a dull, constant reminder. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of my father's hand, heard the brittle sound of my mother's hiss. "Smile, Alicia." I lay there, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, and I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The shock had worn off, the pain had settled into a low burn, and what was left in their place was something new, something cold and hard and clear. It was rage. A rage so pure and so quiet, it felt like a religious awakening. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of my father. It was a cold, clarifying fury. For 28 years, I had paid for their peace with my silence. I had made myself smaller so Ethan could be bigger. I had muted my own colors so their world could remain perfectly beige and orderly. I had accepted their definition of love, which was little more than a transaction where I gave and they took. And my reward for all that sacrifice was a broken face and a cracked phone in a hospital emergency room. That's when the snap happened. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a silent, seismic shift deep within me. The good daughter, the one who tried so hard to earn a love that was never on the table, died in that hospital room. The woman who lay in Mrs. Gable's spare bed was someone else entirely. She was no longer hoping to be loved. She was planning to be free. I sat up, the room spinning for a moment from the concussion. The pain was sharp, but it focused me. I thought of my grandfather, Arthur Pendleton, my mother's father. He was a quiet, shrewd man who had built a small fortune in manufacturing. He hadn't liked my father. I saw that now. I'd been too young to understand the tension between them. The way Grandpa Arthur's eyes would narrow slightly whenever Robert started boasting about Monroe construction. My grandfather had passed away 5 years ago, but his presence suddenly felt incredibly close. I remembered a conversation we'd had shortly before he died. I was home from college, stressed about my finals. We were sitting on his porch watching the sunset. He'd been quiet for a long time. Then he'd turned to me, his gaze serious.
"Alicia," he'd said, his voice raspy with age, "your mother is my daughter, and I love her. But your father is a man who sees the world as a blueprint he has to control, and he will try to control you." He took a sip of his iced tea. "I've set something aside for you, a trust. It's not just money, kid. It's a backup plan. It's freedom." He'd leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And listen to me carefully. If they ever make you choose between their peace and your dignity, you choose your dignity, every single time. Peace that is bought with your silence isn't peace, it's a cage." His words, which had seemed overly dramatic at the time, now echoed in the quiet room with the force of prophecy. It's a cage, and the door had just been slammed in my face. But my grandfather was a meticulous man. He knew my father. He must have known this could happen. A backup plan. I reached for my laptop, which Mrs. Gable had thankfully brought along with my other things. My hands were steady now. The rage had burned away the shakes. I powered it on, the familiar chime a small comfort in the darkness. I was no longer a victim. I was an architect, and it was time to review the blueprints of my own damn life. On my laptop's desktop, hidden behind a folder named Archived Projects, was another folder. It was encrypted and password protected. Its name was Backup Plan. I don't even know why I started it. It began 3 years ago, just after my parents had been given joint oversight of my grandfather's trust. My father had insisted it was a formality, a way to guide me in my financial decisions. My mother had cooed about how families should be open and share everything. But something in their eagerness, something in the way they dismissed my grandfather's lawyer's concerns, had planted a tiny seed of unease in my mind. So I started saving things, quietly, methodically. It was the architect in me, the part that understands that a foundation needs to be solid, that every detail matters.
Every month, when the digital statements for the trust came in, I downloaded a PDF copy before they could be filed away by my father's accountant. When my father used the trust-linked debit card for a family emergency, he'd claimed, which turned out to be a down payment on a boat, I screenshotted the transaction. When my mother borrowed from it for one of her charity galas, promising to pay it back, I saved the email exchange where that promise was made and then conveniently forgotten. Opening the folder now felt different. It was no longer an act of quiet paranoia. It was an act of war. I typed in the password, my grandfather's birthday, and the files appeared. Years of meticulous records. Spreadsheets where I cross-referenced their spending with my own. Scanned receipts. Email chains. It was all there. A cold, hard, digital accounting of their betrayal. I clicked open a file from last year labeled Home Renovations. There it was, a $50,000 transfer from my trust to Monroe Construction. The memo line read, Project Investment, but I knew what it was. It was the new marble kitchen island and the custom cabinetry my mother had bragged about in the local paper. They had used my inheritance, the money my grandfather left to secure my freedom, to upgrade their showcase home. My fingers flew across the keyboard, opening another file. Vacations. A charge for $15,000 at a 5-star resort in Hawaii. My father had told me it was a business trip, but the dates matched their anniversary. I remembered the tanned, happy photos they'd posted online, the ones I had dutifully liked while I was eating ramen noodles in my tiny student apartment. It went on and on. There was a charge for Ethan's spring break trip to Cancun, a charitable donation to a political action committee that, I discovered with a quick search, had just awarded a major city contract to Monroe Construction. And then, the most recent one, the one that made the cold rage in my chest burn even hotter, a charge for over $20,000 to Ethan's university, his tuition. My father had claimed Ethan won a special scholarship. Another lie, paid for with my money. They hadn't just been guiding me. They had been systematically draining my future to fund their present. They had treated my grandfather's legacy as their personal slush fund. They weren't just cruel and controlling, they were thieves. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. It was a perfect, logical, damning case built on years of their own greed. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head again. Freedom needs a backup plan. He hadn't just given me money, he had given me a weapon. And he had trusted that when the time came, I would know how to use it. I opened a new, secure email. My hands were perfectly still. The architect in me was taking over, seeing the structure of what I had to do. I found the contact information I hadn't looked at in years, the law firm that had managed my grandfather's estate. The name on the letterhead jumped out at me, Mr. Davies, the senior partner who had personally handled the will. I started attaching files, the renovation invoice, the vacation charge, the tuition payment. I took a photo of my bruised face with my phone's camera and attached that too. I attached a copy of the hospital discharge papers, which listed assault as the reason for my visit. Under the subject line, I wrote, Activation of Arthur Pendleton's backup plan. In the body of the email, I kept it simple. Dear Mr. Davies, my grandfather told me to contact you if I ever found myself in trouble. I believe that time has come. Please see attached. Sincerely, Alicia Monroe. I hit send. It was 3:17 in the morning. The world outside was dark and silent, but in that small borrowed room, a fuse had just been lit. I didn't expect an immediate reply. It was the middle of the night. I figured I'd get a call or an email from his office sometime the next business day. I closed my laptop, the weight of what I had just done settling over me. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. For the first time, I hadn't absorbed the blow and stayed silent. I had hit back. My phone buzzed on the nightstand less than 10 minutes later. An unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. Had they found me? Was it my father? I answered with a trembling hand. Hello? Miss Monroe, this is Arthur Davies. The voice was calm, deep, and steady. It was the voice of a man who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. I apologize for the late hour, but your email was flagged as urgent by my system. I've reviewed the documents you sent. First, and most importantly, are you in a safe location? Yes, I breathed, relief washing over me. I'm safe. Good, he said. Do not, under any circumstances, return to your parents' home or your own apartment, and do not answer any calls from them. Am I clear? Yes. There was a pause on the line, and I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. Your grandfather was a very wise man, Alicia. He was also a very cautious one. He foresaw a situation like this. There are provisions, more than just the hardship clause you're likely aware of. Provisions to protect you from them, specifically. Provisions. The word held a weight that I couldn't quite grasp yet. It sounded like armor. What do I do now? I asked. For now, you do nothing. You rest. Let me handle this. I'll be in touch in the morning with a concrete plan. Your father has underestimated you, Alicia. And he most certainly underestimated your grandfather. That is a mistake he will come to regret. When I hung up the phone, the cold rage inside me had been joined by something else, a fragile, flickering flame of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had my grandfather's foresight and his lawyer on my side. I finally drifted into a restless sleep, but I was woken a few hours later by my phone buzzing again. This time, the caller ID read Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. My stomach twisted. Aunt Carol had always been the cool aunt, the one who would slip me $20 on my birthday and whisper conspiratorially about how overbearing my parents could be. She was my only ally in that family, or so I thought. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Oh, honey, thank God. Her voice was a rush of frantic, manufactured concern. I just heard what happened. Your mother is beside herself with worry. Are you okay? Where are you? Your father, he just lost his temper. You know how he gets. He feels terrible, absolutely terrible. I listened to the performance, my mind suddenly clear. Mr. Davis's warning echoed in my ears. Do not answer any calls from them. This was them. This was their reconnaissance mission, sent in under a flag of false sympathy. I'm fine, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice deliberately flat. Fine? Honey, your mother said there was a terrible accident, that you fell. It wasn't an accident, I cut in, my voice cold. There was a beat of silence. Well, whatever it was, you need to come home, she urged, her tone shifting slightly, a note of impatience creeping in. We're family. We can work this out. Hiding away like this is just making things worse. Your mother is worried you're going to do something drastic, maybe something with a lawyer. That would be a terrible mistake, Alicia. It would tear this family apart. And there it was, the real reason for the call. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the consequences. They were worried I had called a lawyer. My silence was their shield, and they were terrified I was about to drop it. I have to go, Aunt Carol, I said. Alicia, wait! I ended the call. The betrayal stung, but it was a shallow wound compared to the others. It was just another confirmation that in my family, loyalty was a one-way street, and I was on the wrong side of it. They weren't a family. They were a conspiracy, held together by secrets and control, and I was about to expose every last one of them. The rest of the day was a blur of quiet waiting in Mrs. Gable's house. She was a perfect guardian, bringing me tea and toast, never asking questions I wasn't ready to answer, and leaving me to the solitude I desperately needed. I spent hours just sitting by the window, watching the world go on as if mine hadn't just been shattered. I was in a strange limbo, a refugee from my own life, waiting for a signal from an ally I had never met in person. Late that afternoon, an email notification popped up on my laptop. The sender was an address I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to delete it, assuming it was another probe from my family. But the subject line caught my eye. It just said, "The party." My curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it open. The email was short, with no greeting and no signature. I saw what he did. What they all did. My phone was recording. I don't know if this is useful, but I thought you should have it. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. Attached was a video file. My hand trembled as I clicked download. Who would have sent this? Who at that party would have defied my father? The file finished downloading, and I pressed play. The video was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone held at someone's side. It captured the scene from the perspective of someone sitting near Ethan's group of friends. I could hear their loud, boisterous laughter. Then, the sound of my mother tapping her glass. The camera panned up, shakily, to frame my parents. It captured the whole toast, the smirks, the polite laughter. Then, it captured my no. The camera zoomed in slightly on my face, then swiveled to my father as he started walking toward me. The person filming was trying to be subtle, but they captured everything. They captured the moment my father's face twisted with rage. They captured the sharp, ugly sound of the slap. They captured the collective gasp from the crowd. And then, most damningly of all, they captured my mother's voice, clear as a bell, hissing, "Smile, Alicia, you are embarrassing us." The video ended. I sat there, staring at the black screen, my heart pounding in my ears. This wasn't just my word against theirs anymore. This was proof. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. It was the visual evidence of the assault and the immediate chilling proof of my mother's emotional cruelty. This changed everything. But who sent it? I scrolled back up to the sender's email address. It was a jumble of letters and numbers, but then I saw the name attached to the account, a name I hadn't even noticed before. Chloe. Chloe, Ethan's girlfriend. I was stunned. Chloe was everything I wasn't. She was a fashion merchandising major, always dressed in designer clothes, with a dismissive air that suggested she found my quiet, bookish nature profoundly boring. She had always looked right through me at family gatherings, another piece of the beige furniture. In my mind, she was firmly in their camp, a perfect match for my self-absorbed brother. But she had sent me the video. She had seen the ugliness behind the perfect facade and, for whatever reason, had decided to take a stand. She had chosen a side. My side. It was a staggering realization. An ally had emerged from the last place on earth I would have expected. My family had spent years making me feel isolated, making me believe their version of reality was the only one. But in that moment, with that video file sitting on my laptop, their power began to crumble. They couldn't gaslight a video. They couldn't manipulate a recording. I immediately forwarded the email to Mr. Emmett Davies with a simple note. His reply came back within minutes. "I've received it. This is definitive. Stay put. The plan is now in motion. They are about to make a very big mistake." I didn't know what he meant, but I felt a shiver of anticipation. The ground was shifting beneath my feet. For years, I had been playing defense, just trying to survive in their world. Now, for the first time, I was on the offense, and I had an arsenal they never saw coming. For 2 days, the world was silent. I stayed hidden away at Mrs. Gable's, my phone turned off. The quiet was a balm, but it was also laced with a tense, humming anticipation. I knew my family. Their silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. They were regrouping, planning their next move, and I knew it wouldn't be an apology. The call from Mr. Davies came on Tuesday morning. "Alicia," he said, his voice grave, "they've made their move, and it's as arrogant and foolish as I predicted." "What did they do?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "They have filed an emergency petition with the probate court," he explained. "They are seeking temporary guardianship over you and your estate." I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the words taking a moment to register. Guardianship, like I was a child, or mentally incompetent. "On what grounds?" I whispered, horrified. "They're claiming you are suffering from severe emotional and mental instability," he quoted, his voice dripping with disdain. "They allege that your outburst at the party was a symptom of a larger breakdown, and that you are now a danger to yourself and your finances. They're using your disappearance as proof that you're unstable and easily manipulated." It was breathtaking. It wasn't enough to hit me, to steal from me. Now they were trying to erase me. They were trying to legally strip me of my own mind, my own agency. They wanted to have me declared officially broken so they could take control of everything. It was a power play of such stunning cruelty that I almost couldn't breathe. "Can they do that?" My voice trembled. "They can certainly try," Mr. Davies said, and for the first time I heard a sliver of steel in his tone. "And in doing so, they have walked directly into the trap your grandfather set for them over 5 years ago. They have requested a hearing. The judge has scheduled it for tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow? It was happening that fast. "They believe you'll be alone," he continued. "They believe you are the timid, frightened girl they have always known. They are expecting you to fall apart on the stand. They have no idea that I am representing you. They have no idea about the evidence we possess." He laid out the plan. I was to meet him at his office an hour before the hearing. I was to wear something professional. I was not to speak during the proceedings unless spoken to by the judge. And most importantly, I was to trust him. After I hung up, I walked into the small bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek had faded to a sickly yellow-green, a visible reminder of the family incident. They were trying to use my pain as a weapon against me, to paint me as the crazy one, my own parents. I thought about all the years I had let them define me. Alicia, the quiet one. Alicia, the responsible one. Alicia, the peacekeeper. They had created a character for me to play, and I had played it so well, I had almost forgotten who I really was. But looking at the woman in the mirror, with the bruise on her cheek and the cold fire in her eyes, I knew that character was gone forever. They wanted to put me on trial for being unstable. They had no idea. I had never been more clear-headed in my life. They thought this was their final checkmate move. They didn't realize they were just pieces on a board, far more complex than they could ever imagine. A board that had been designed by a master. And tomorrow, the game would finally end. The law offices of Davies, Crane and Associates were everything my family's house was not. Where our home was decorated in warm creams and soft fabrics to hide its sharp edges, this place was all dark wood, cool leather, and an air of unshakable gravitas. It smelled of old paper and justice. Mr. Davies was older than I'd pictured, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, but a jawline that suggested he had little patience for fools. He greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a conference room. "They've arrived at the courthouse," he said simply, gesturing for me to sit. "Their lawyer is a man named Peterson. He's cocky. That's good for us." He walked me through the process. They would present their case first. My parents would likely testify, painting a picture of a loving family worried sick about their disturbed daughter. Then it would be our turn. "Your only job today, Alicia, is to remain calm," he instructed, his gaze steady and reassuring. "No matter what lies they tell, no matter how they try to provoke you, you do not react. You are the picture of stability. Let them be the ones who look emotional and unhinged. Understood?" I nodded, my throat dry. When we walked into the small courtroom, they were already there. My father, Robert, stood tall and imposing in a dark suit, his face a mask of solemn concern. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside him, dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. She looked fragile, heartbroken. It was a masterful performance. Ethan was there too, sitting behind them, looking uncomfortable and out of his depth. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away. Their lawyer, Peterson, gave me a dismissive glance, then a confident smirk to my father. He saw what they wanted him to see, a bruised, scared young woman. He didn't see the architect. He didn't see the fury. He didn't see the reams of evidence sitting in Mr. Davies' leather briefcase. The hearing began. Peterson laid it on thick, his voice oozing with false sympathy. He spoke of my history of being overly emotional, my troubling withdrawal from the family. He framed their financial oversight of my trust not as control, but as a loving attempt to help me manage my significant and perhaps overwhelming inheritance. Then my mother took the stand. Her voice was soft and trembling as she recounted the night of the party. In her telling, I was hysterical, triggered by a light-hearted family joke. She spoke of my fall, a tragic accident in the midst of my emotional episode. She wept as she told the judge she was terrified for my safety, that this guardianship was the only way to get me the help I so desperately need. It was a work of art, a tapestry woven from lies and half-truths, designed to make me look like a lunatic. My father was next. He was all gravitas and sorrow. He spoke of his love for me, his pride in my accomplishments. He admitted he'd been stern with me, but only because he was desperately trying to get through to me. He looked at the judge, a father's feigned pain etched on his face. "Your Honor, all we want is to protect our daughter from herself." I sat there, my hands clenched in my lap, my posture perfectly still. I listened to them dismantle my character, twist my reality, and try to assassinate my sanity in a court of law. And I did not move a muscle. I just let them talk. I let them build their own gallows, lie by lie. The inheritance they so lovingly wanted to manage. The college fund for my brother they'd provided through a fictional scholarship. Their web of deceit was impressive. But my lawyer was about to set it on fire. Finally, the judge turned to our table. "Mr. Davies, your response?" Mr. Davies rose slowly, a file in his hand. "Your Honor," he began, his calm voice cutting through the cloying emotion in the room. "The Monroes have painted a compelling picture of a family in crisis. The only problem is, it is not an accurate one. I would like to present a slightly different version of events." Mr. Davies walked to the clerk and handed over a USB drive. "With the court's permission," he said, "I'd like to begin by addressing the matter of Miss Monroe's financial competency." A large screen on the wall flickered to life. And then, there it was, my spreadsheet. A cold, clear, color-coded ledger of every transaction, every transfer, every loan that was never repaid. Mr. Davies, in a dry, methodical voice, began to walk the judge through it. "Here," he said, pointing to a highlighted line with a laser pointer, "we have a transfer of $50,000 from Miss Monroe's trust to Monroe Construction, noted as a project investment.
However, bank records and contractor invoices show this money was used for a kitchen remodel at the Monroe residence. My father stiffened. My mother's hand flew to her pearls. Peterson, their lawyer, started to rise, an objection on his lips, but the judge waved him down, her eyes fixed on the screen. Mr. Davies continued, relentless. Here, a $15,000 charge at the Four Seasons in Maui, coinciding with Mr. and Mrs. Monroe's wedding anniversary. And here, the most recent, a payment of over $20,000 for Ethan Monroe's college tuition, money that was allegedly covered by a scholarship. He clicked to the next slide. It was a scanned copy of an email from my mother. Dearest Alicia, just a small loan for the spring gala. We'll pay it back as soon as the pledges come in. You know how important keeping up appearances is. Love, Mom. That loan was never repaid, Your Honor, Mr. Davies stated flatly. Over the past 3 years, Robert and Eleanor Monroe have systematically misappropriated over $150,000 from their daughter's trust fund. This isn't the record of a young woman who is incompetent. This is the record of a meticulous young woman who has been the victim of sustained financial abuse at the hands of her parents. A thick, heavy silence filled the courtroom. My father's face was turning a blotchy red. My mother looked as if she'd been struck. Peterson was shuffling his papers, his confident smirk completely gone. And now, Mr. Davies said, his voice dropping slightly, let's address the unfortunate fall that occurred at the birthday party. He nodded to the clerk. My spreadsheet vanished from the screen, replaced by the shaky video from Chloe's phone. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. They saw the toast. They heard my quiet, no. They watched my father stride across the patio. And then they saw it, in undeniable, high-definition clarity, the slap. The sound echoed in the quiet room, sharp and ugly. It was followed by the raw, clear audio of my mother's voice. Smile, Alicia. You are embarrassing us. The judge flinched. A quiet gasp came from the back of the room. My father shot to his feet. This is an invasion of privacy. This is doctored. It's a lie, he bellowed, his face contorted with rage. Mr. Monroe, sit down, the judge commanded, her voice like cracking ice. He stood there, trembling with fury, a wild animal caught in a trap. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw no remorse, only hatred. Hatred that I had dared to expose him. Mr. Davies waited until my father had sunk back into his chair. Your Honor, he said quietly, the only person in this room who is unstable and a danger to Alicia is the man who just had that outburst. The Monroes did not file this petition to protect their daughter. They filed it to silence her. They filed it to maintain control of her trust fund, which they have been treating as their own. This is not a family matter. This is fraud, assault, and a calculated attempt to abuse the court system. He paused, letting the words sink in. My mother was openly weeping now, but her tears held no power here. They were just water. My father looked broken, deflated, his narcissistic rage collapsing into a stunned, empty void. The judge looked from the frozen image of the slap on the screen to my parents, then to me. Her expression was hard, disgusted. The lie was dead, the truth was out, and the beautiful illusion of the Monroe family had been burned to the ground in a public courtroom. Just when I thought the humiliation for my parents was complete, Mr. Davies took one final step toward the judge's bench. Your Honor, he said, there is one final matter to address. It pertains to the last will and testament of my late client, Mr. Arthur Pendleton, Alicia's maternal grandfather.
He produced a thick, leather-bound document. My father looked up, a flicker of confusion on his face. What did my grandfather's old will have to do with this? As the court is now aware, Mr. Davies began, Mr. and Mrs. Monroe have engaged in a pattern of abuse against their daughter. This is a tragedy, but it is not, I'm afraid, an unforeseen one. Mr. Pendleton was a man of remarkable foresight. He opened the document to a tabbed page. Mr. Pendleton was the primary investor in the founding of Monroe Construction, he stated, and I saw my father's head snap up. In fact, his initial seed money constituted a majority stake in the company, a stake he gifted to his son-in-law, Robert Monroe, upon his retirement. Peterson, their lawyer, finally found his voice. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance? It is supremely relevant, Mr. Davies countered smoothly, because that gift came with a very specific and very binding condition. It's all detailed right here in what my client liked to call the fiduciary duty clause. He cleared his throat and began to read. His voice filled the silent courtroom, every word a hammer blow. This transfer of controlling shares in the Pendleton Manufacturing Successor Company, now known as Monroe Construction, to my son-in-law, Robert Monroe, is conditional. It is contingent upon his continued execution of his moral and fiduciary duty to the well-being of my granddaughter, Alicia Monroe. The clause continues, Mr. Davies said, should Robert Monroe at any point be found by a legal authority or through binding arbitration to have engaged in acts of physical abuse, emotional abuse, or financial malfeasance against my granddaughter Alicia, such actions shall constitute a fundamental breach of this trust. In the event of such a breach, he let the words hang in the air for a dramatic beat. All shares and controlling interest in Monroe Construction shall be immediately and irrevocably forfeited by Robert Monroe and transferred in their entirety to Alicia Monroe, their rightful heir. The world stopped. The air was sucked out of the room. My mother made a small, strangled sound, like a dying bird. My father just stared. He didn't seem to be breathing. His entire life, his identity, the company he so proudly claimed to have built from the ground up, it was all built on a foundation of my grandfather's money and protected by a clause he never knew existed. It wasn't just a backup plan for me. It was a time bomb. A dead man's switch designed to protect me and to deliver the ultimate punishment if that protection was ever needed. My grandfather hadn't just given me a shield, he'd given me a sword sharp enough to sever my father's entire world from its moorings. This is insane, Peterson stammered, looking at the document as if it were a venomous snake. This can't be legal. I assure you it is perfectly legal, Mr. Davies said calmly. It was drafted by me, signed by Mr. Pendleton, and witnessed. It is ironclad. And based on the evidence presented today, the financial records, the video evidence of the assault, the conditions for the breach have been unequivocally met. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, we will be filing for immediate enforcement of this clause. But for today, I believe the matter of the guardianship petition is resolved. The judge stared at my parents, her expression a mixture of contempt and disbelief. Petition for guardianship is denied with extreme prejudice, she snapped. I am also referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential charges of assault and financial crimes. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, you should consider yourselves lucky if you are not arrested upon leaving this courthouse. She banged her gavel, the sound sealing their fate. My father didn't move. He just sat there, a hollowed-out shell of the titan who had entered the room. He had lost everything, not just the guardianship, not just my trust fund. He had lost his company, his legacy, his pride. He had tried to take my future, and in doing so, he had forfeited his own. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably, but they were the ugly, gasping sobs of a woman who had just lost her status, her comfort, her entire world. They didn't even look at me. It was as if I wasn't there. To them, I had never been a person, only a resource. And now, the resource had just seized the entire damn company. My grandfather, the quiet, watchful man from my childhood, had reached out from beyond the grave and delivered a justice so perfect, so complete, it was almost biblical. They had slapped me for saying no to a car, and in return, they had lost an empire. Thank you for staying with me through that. You are a truly wonderful and patient audience. Please hit that like button and comment with the number 1 below, just so I know you've journeyed this far with me. Your support is an incredible encouragement that helps me keep going. Now comment with the 1 and listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The aftermath was not a storm, but a quiet, creeping decay. The beautiful lie of the Monroe family had been exposed, and it began to rot from the inside out. I didn't have to do anything else. The wheels of justice, once set in motion by my grandfather's meticulous planning, turned on their own. I moved into a small, sunlit apartment on the other side of town. It had bare walls and secondhand furniture, but every single thing in it was mine. The silence was the most beautiful part. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of my parents' house. It was a clean, peaceful silence that belonged to me. I could breathe. For the first time in 28 years, I could actually breathe. The news of the court hearings spread through our town's gossip channels like wildfire. The story was too juicy, too dramatic to be contained. Local business owner investigated for fraud. Monroe construction in turmoil. My name was never mentioned in the papers, but everyone knew. Mr. Davies handled the corporate takeover with swift, surgical precision. The board was notified, the transfer of shares was executed. My father was unceremoniously removed from the company he had treated as his kingdom. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. They had to sell the house, my childhood home, to cover the legal fees and the money they were court-ordered to repay to my trust. My mother withdrew from all her social clubs, her reign as the perfect hostess coming to an ignominious end. Ethan was forced to drop out of college. Without the steady flow of my trust money, the scholarship that never existed, and the future promise of a cushy job at Daddy's company, his golden boy future evaporated. One evening, about a month after the hearing, he called me. It was the first time I'd heard from any of them. His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy desperation I'd never heard before. "Alicia," he started, Look, Dad told me to call. Things are really bad. We have to move out." "Mom cries all the time." He took a shaky breath. "We were wondering, maybe you could help, just a loan, to get us back on our feet. You own the company now. You have all that money." I listened to him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a vast, empty distance. He still didn't get it. He still thought of me as a resource, a solution to his problems. He hadn't called to apologize for a lifetime of taking me for granted or for standing by while I was assaulted. He had called to ask for money. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice calm and even. "I can't help you." "But we're family," he pleaded, the old entitlement flaring for a moment. "No, we're not," I replied softly. "Not anymore." And I hung up. A week later, a package arrived from Mr. Davies. Inside was not a legal document, but a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with my grandfather's wax stamp. My name was written on the front in his familiar, elegant script. It was a letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Alicia," it began. "If you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It means the man I allowed to marry my daughter has revealed his true nature, and you have been hurt. For that, I am sorrier than words can say. I hope you can forgive an old man for not intervening sooner, but I knew you had to find your own strength, and I never for 1 second doubted that you would. I did not give Robert that company as a gift, my dear. I gave it to him as a test of his character. I knew his greed, but I had hoped his love for his family would be stronger. It seems I was wrong. The company was never truly his. It was always a placeholder. It was always meant for you. He thinks he built it, but you and I know the truth. The foundation was mine. The real architect was always going to be you. Go now, build something worthy of your name, not his, yours. With all my love, Grandpa Arthur." I folded the letter, tears blurring my vision. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. He had seen me. All along, when I felt invisible, he had seen me. He hadn't just left me a fortune. He had left me a legacy and a mission. It's been a year since that day in court. I never sold Monroe Construction. I took it over. At first, the old guard on the board were skeptical. A 28-year-old woman, an architect, taking over a construction empire? But I had my grandfather's blood in my veins, and I had something my father never did, a vision that wasn't built on ego. I rebranded the company. It's called Pendleton Homes now, my grandfather's name. We don't just build McMansions for the wealthy anymore. We build affordable, beautifully designed community housing. We partner with nonprofits. We're building something that lasts, something that matters. I found that the skills of an architect, the attention to detail, the understanding of structure, the ability to see a project through from blueprint to reality are the skills of a good CEO. I never spoke to my parents again. I heard through the grapevine that they moved to a small rental apartment in a town a few hours away. My father works as a consultant, a shadow of his former self. My mother, without her grand stage, has faded. Sometimes I wonder if they ever feel remorse, but I know better. People like them don't feel remorse for their actions, only for the consequences. I started writing, not just architectural plans, but my story. At first, it was just for me, a way to process the tangled mess of my past. I sat at my laptop late at night, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and I wrote it all down. The golden lights of the party, the cold glare of the ER, the quiet triumph in the courtroom. I realized that taking back my trust fund, taking over the company, it was never about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. What I felt was colder, clearer. It was justice. It was survival. It was proof that peace built on your own terms is the only peace worth having. It's louder and stronger than any pain they can inflict. For so long, I believed my silence made me weak, but now I see it for what it was, the deep breath before the roar, the quiet gathering of strength. The story isn't about them anymore. It's about me anymore, and about every person who has ever been told to smile while they are breaking, to stay quiet for the sake of a false peace. If you have ever been in that position, if you have ever been made to feel small so someone else could feel big, please know this. Your voice is your own. Your silence is not their property. Speak. Walk away. Rebuild. Even if your voice shakes, even if you have to start with nothing but a bruised cheek and a flicker of rage. Tonight, as I finish telling you this, I'm sitting in my own home, a place I designed and built. The city stretches out before me, a tapestry of a million lights. I raise my coffee cup to the window. They once raised a glass to my obedience. Tonight, I raise mine to my freedom. This is what it feels like, and it's worth every fight. Thank you so much for listening to my whole story. I'm truly grateful for your time and your presence. Please comment with the letter A below so I know you're one of the special ones who made it all the way to the end. If you have any thoughts or feelings you'd like to share, I'd love to read them. And please continue to explore the other stories on this channel. You never know whose voice you might need to hear next.